I think in many instances the kind of crises that we will have to face in the future will be far more complex, far more uncertain. I think we're going to see far more interaction between technological crises and natural hazards. And I think the implications of this are extraordinary. Take, for example, cybernetic failures. All of a sudden, a small portion of a meteorite hits a satellite that determines so much of a particular region's cybernetic future. That means if that cybernetic capacity is knocked out, if that satellite no longer functions, down goes extraordinary amounts of infrastructure capacity, of economic potential, etc. How do you deal with that? Who's thinking about that? And these are the kind of issues that really the humanitarian sector, the future, or in anticipating the future, has to start thinking about. It's not that we can predict, but we have to have the capacity to think about what might be. This will give us the agility, this anticipatory quality that will enable us to say, if this happened, what kind of partnerships, what kind of innovations would we need? And this is where the humanitarian sector has to be. And this is where the humanitarian sector really is not. There really will be a resurgence of sovereignty, and we see this time and time again when it comes to quote-unquote affected nations, be it Turkey, be it Myanmar, be it a host of other countries that have recently been affected. Governments are saying, we want to have greater control over this. And why? Because more and more the ways that they handle humanitarian crises will determine their very survival. Governments, be it President Obama's government or be it the government of Myanmar, realizes that the way we handle crises will determine in so many ways how and whether we will survive. This sort of transition where humanitarian crises no longer are at the periphery, but are at the core of political concern, has many implications. For example, whether or not non-governmental organizations of the traditional type will actually be allowed in. Wouldn't it be easier for me as a government to have a company, and I use this totally hypothetically, such as Johnson & Johnson, deal with a crisis than, for example, a health NGO? So these are the kind of decisions, transitions that I think one will have to be aware of. My dream would be to transform the United Nations. I think as presently structured, the United Nations cannot be an effective actor. It cannot, in other words, balance its role of negotiation, its role of promoting access, as well as implementation. If you have both a delivery role, an implementation role, and a monitoring role, they will clash. You have to get rid of one, and the United Nations' unique value is to monitor, to assess. And I think ultimately that United Nations that will be really fit for the future will be a United Nations that promotes, advocates ways to anticipate crises and to say, these are the kind of things that responsible leaders around the world will be doing to ensure that the vulnerabilities that lead to the kind of crises we otherwise could see can be eliminated, and the United Nations can at least show you how.